I felt paralyzed, as if my stomach had been pulled out of my mouth and wrapped around my legs. It happened all of a sudden as soon as the driver hit the George Washington Bridge. My brother Thomas was engaged to be married in a few months, and so for the first time in 10 years, I was returning to the city. Just as always, the first thing that struck me about New York City was how it could be so magnificent and horrible all at once. How the same city that nurtures that sacred place inside in which a flower might grow could also seek to destroy it so viciously. But that was New York, always completely at odds with itself, never venerating any inhabitant over the idea that none was free from judgment. The city blazed with a supernatural light, and the Hudson River was the same blue as the ocean, or so it seemed at least to me. You could see the Empire State Building, and the empty space left by the Twin Towers, now filled by some monolith standing radiant and sun-kissed, pushing beyond the limit of human progress. I thought of my father, and the heart attack that paralyzed him, and wondered if the same weakness was in my heart, or if it had skipped a generation. I thought of my mother, who tended to him, making sure that he ate, and nurtured inside him that feeling that all human beings feel when they are properly alive, wondering how she tended to that part of herself. But most of all, I thought of where I was when the event occurred and how 5 years later I had not been back. The son of Charles Stone had been 1534 miles away in the middle of a card game outside of the capital city of Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic when Charles felt the pressure in his chest. My mother, Catherine, had been sitting right next to him when all the breath was knocked out of the room. The driver said nothing, and neither did I. But his silence was startling to me, and I wondered if he was judging me, though secretly I didn't care. It had been almost a decade without a home, wandering nonstop searching for the very thing I had left behind me. When my location could finally be ascertained, and a phone number found, and rang, there was no answer. I was nodding out alongside a 300-peso whore who was plotting viciously against me, but who, fortunately for me, was too high to execute any of her foul plans. Even if she had managed to follow through with her co-conspirators and get me duct-taped with my hands zip-tied behind my back, the soldering iron which she thought would extract some ransom would have failed. It had been years since I had communicated with my family. It was only 2 weeks later, when finally I picked up the receiver of the phone and heard the words "come home," that I could have gotten into touch with anyone who could have paid such a dreadful bail. And still I had not come home. There were palm trees outside the airport in the Dominican Republic. In New York, the airport was like the lead coffin constructed around the Chernobyl nuclear plant when the reactors failed. A silent feeling came over me as soon as we landed. A silent feeling like the sun was pointed directly at me, and the mute button had been pushed on the television set. And all the horrible light and all the horrible silence at once coursing through me was too much to handle. And there I was, sitting in that silence, as the driver said nothing, and I said nothing, both of us aware of nothing but that. So I made a promise to myself that I would never break that quiet, trade that uncomfortable sensation for the ridiculous banality of small talk. I decided I would sit with that feeling, and know it, and live inside it, for however long it lasted, no matter how uncomfortable it was. It was in the midst of that silence that the cab exited off the GWB and entered Washington Heights on 178th Street. The Port Authority was not filled with the horde, it was not filled with the whores and drunks it had been when I left. The drug dealers and crack addicts burning beyond fire were gone. The question begged to be asked, although it had no satisfactory answer, which it made less satisfactory answer, which it made less satisfying to ask, sir. Which it made less satisfying to ask. The question being, where had they gone? The answer was I said, come out the other side. It was then that the cab stopped, and the driver broke the silence to collect the fare. But I, refusing to break the silence, simply handed him a generous fare, refusing any further interactions. The light was the same as it always was, or at least as I had always remembered it. It was the light that had always burned here, the light that I had set out to leave from. In that moment that I saw myself, a pilgrim seeking strangeness in a strange land familiar enough to call home. I was standing in front of the building taking in the light when my brother walked up to me. I could see his face, and in the light, he looked exactly as he had, and only when he walked into the shade to speak with me was it that I could see the age on his face.
It's good to see you, Thomas.
Even just to say the words made me feel a certain lightness. There was still some place for me, even if I had run from it.
I'm glad that you came back.
Thomas looked at me, and I could feel the guilt and doubt welling up in my chest.
I would never miss my little brother's wedding. You didn't think I would, did you?
I knew you were having a rough time.
I'm here now, that's all that matters.
And so we went upstairs and had dinner, my mother, father, brother, and I. My mother looked like the same woman she had always been, her face generous and kind. My father's face was majestic, the lines on his face noble, and each time he smiled it was gentle. It was as if they had come to the end of a great struggle, and sitting down to eat at the end of that struggle. It is unclear whether or not it is the beginning of more struggle, or a feast to celebrate the end of all suffering.
Attention everyone, attention, I have some news.
My father ringing his wine glass with a spoon was the sound everyone heard clanging inside their eardrums as their hearts dropped straight down into their stomachs. And the acids of our stomachs boiling against the arteries of our hearts caused a strange and frightening sensation. That is when we found out about the cancer. And if it was also a terrible burning it incited, it was also a great relief to know what the next challenge was. And so we set out against it. And I was humbled by a chance to prove my loyalty. I would show that it had been a kind of treason against myself and not against my family that had caused my leaving. So I moved back into my childhood home with no other goal but seeing to my parents and attending my brother's wedding. Perhaps I would write a little and read some philosophy, starting with the Greeks and hopefully making it at least to the existentialist. I would set about trying to make things better for the last 10 years. And if at least I could do it only partially, it would be a tremendous quest accomplished. So that night I slept in the room I had slept in 10 years before. In the sheets I had slept in 10 years before. Covered in aliens and lightning bolts, with a poster of a Cheshire cat grinning on top of a mushroom smoke in a joint. With a caterpillar I smoked a joint from my stash spot. And for once in the last 10 years felt a sense of total awe and appreciation come over me. I woke up in the morning with a new light that I could not remember whether or not I had ever experienced before. In the morning, my eyes opened to the pale light of the sun coming in through the blinds. As no one else was awake, I decided to head out into the streets and take a walk. It was time to explore this place that I had formerly called home and see if it was still familiar to my eyes. As good as I felt about being home, I also felt as if the contents of my insides had been removed, scooped out bit by bit, and the remains purged with fire. Downstairs, the joggers and the dog walkers ruled, it seemed. It was clear that Washington Heights wasn't the same place. As people walked by, they smiled at me, and it only disturbed me further. 10 years had changed everything, and the neighborhood was now a different kind of place. Once there had been an uncontrolled force, like an electric current that ran through it, but it had been removed, as if some kind of spiritual lobotomy had been performed. I kept looking all around, hoping to find some familiar sight. A crack whore, or a drunk, or at the very least some kind of artistic outsider seeking wisdom and pleasure, but it was not so. So I headed to the other side of Broadway, where I thought I would have better luck. Past 181st Street and on the other side of Broadway, things were different. It was still not as it was, but it was closer. I felt more comfortable as soon as I saw the first homeless couple, who was easy to pick out from the crowd based on the appearance of their clothing and the manner in which they carried themselves. There was a way that the homeless walked that marked them. They performed as though a part of a strange theatrical performance, and it was clear when they spoke or walked that underneath the surface of their hearts was a strange ocean. I passed by a methadone clinic, outside of which was a long line filled with unhappy faces. Their bones creaked, and their eyes cried out. The sight was so horrible to me that I had to cross the street. And as I went to walk to the other side, I accidentally bumped into someone.
Hey, what the fuck are you doing? Pay attention. Oh, hey, wait, is that you, Jacob?
Said a voice that sounded all at once familiar and strange. It was the cousin of an old friend. The last time I had seen him, we were both in our 20s, and everything was in front of us. Now his teeth were yellow, his clothes were ragged, and his soul was trampled.
Just got back into town after 10 years.
I said, and I told him the story of how I had winded up in front of him. I spoke to him about the years away, about the Greyhound buses and the international flights, about my father with cancer and my brother who I had let down. He nodded his head over and over as if he understood, and I felt slightly better despite the fact nothing had been accomplished.
Look, come with me. Let's go get fucked up. Let's go to my girl's house.
He said, and I told him that I would hang out, but that I was only smoking grass because I was trying to get things straightened out. I told him that even though I had spent the last decade shooting dope on and off, I was trying to change things. When he rang the buzzer, a voice came up on the intercom.
Who the fuck is that?
Inside the lobby of the building, the walls were painted yellow. There was a strange, dank smell that filled the whole lobby. When we finally got to the apartment door, he banged on the front of it, and the door opened with the latch on it.
Who the fuck is this?
This is Jacob. You remember Henry's friend?
Then the girl went and sat down on a filthy cotton fabric recliner stained and off yellow. It was in front of the television, and I understood that there would most likely be no further interactions between us. There was a table next to the recliner, and on the table, I could see the works: needles, lighters, cigarettes, spoons, and everything but drugs. Mo sat down on a couch, and so I sat next to him. Shit, I forgot. I don't have any grass left. You got any money, Jacob? I was starting to remember why I left, but I couldn't leave now. I handed him $20. I knew the game. He gave the money to his girl, and she left the apartment.
Man, that bitch does whatever I say. You see that?
I wondered what she would say to that if she was here. So we continued to sit, and at all once he got up and went to the fridge. I asked him how his cousin was. It had been a few months since we had spoken. I told him the truth. The answer was the same to all of the questions. I didn't know. How could I? So I rolled up a joint while he and his girl sat there and loaded up their spoons. I was horrified and envious all at once.
Your girl all right?
Bitch, wake up. This bitch fucking probably was holding back on me. She must have had extra shit. Ain't no way she could catch a nod that good off half a bag. She ain't even breathing.
I felt an empty feeling that I knew should be remorse, but I felt no remorse.
Hey man, help me. What am I supposed to do?
I thanked him for the beer and told him it had been good to catch up. There was no escaping. This was the world we lived in. It was a couple weeks later that I started to feel the fear. It came on slowly as the novelty of the place reclined. My thoughts were like anchors in terrible waters. I was afraid at all times. My father's health was the same, and my brother was busy with the preparations for his wedding. My mother tended to my father, and there was very little for me to do. I had dark thoughts and poisoned dreams. Visions of a New York purged by the fire of nuclear war. Instead of men and women and children walking through the streets, I would see a New York taken over by beings of light. These beings were made of pure consciousness and didn't need to speak to communicate their thoughts. I knew that they wouldn't want me around, though, and I would probably be forced into exile. There was nothing here for me. New York City was a pit. So at night I would walk from the George Washington Bridge down to Columbia University and back again over and over. On one of those walks I bumped into Mo again. He asked me if I wanted to buy any cocaine or heroin. I asked him if he could get me weight, and he quoted me a ridiculous number. It was my only in, so I took the last of my card money and got an ounce of cocaine and heroin. So I mostly just snorted the heroin from time to time. I would take the heroin and cut it with milk sugar and sell a gram for twice as much as I paid. From time to time, I even sold to Mo. I wasn't sure why, but it felt like I had done enough, and this was all that could be done to fix it. So at night, I would take heroin and sometimes cocaine. The heroin relaxed me, and the cocaine got me hungover. I knew I would need to find a better connection if I wanted to make any money. So I spoke to Henry even though we hadn't spoke for a couple of years. I had visited him when I was in the DR. He ran a brothel on the island and owned a few used car dealerships. I knew if anyone could put me in touch with a good connection, it was Henry. Me and Henry had met when we were teenagers through a mutual friend. They sold me an ounce of good enough quality for cheap enough that I could cut it and double my money on each gram. The only problem was that I was snorting more of it than I was selling. what I was using canceled out any profits I made. It was a terrible cycle that allowed me just enough rope to hang myself. Eventually, I found that I had worked up a habit. Though it was not a terribly big habit, I read books of philosophy and wrote. The visions came back, but they were different. This time, instead of just beings of light, I saw the skeletons of all the former inhabitants standing burning on fire in front of the beings of light. I persisted and smoked marijuana till I could eat. I even worked out, so great was my fear of falling backwards that I moved forward at an alarming rate. I would not be stopped. I could not be stopped. I could not be stopped. A man afraid of death can do anything. Day by day I got better. I would eat soup, and even full meals occasionally when I smoked enough. I even went for walks in the park on my days off, and in the park there was a large rock overlooking a medieval castle I would sit on. The castle had been brought over brick by brick from Spain, and I would sit on that natural rock looking at that unnatural rock structure and read philosophy. I even rented an apartment close by with the money from being a janitor, though my father still did not seem to be getting better. But just when it seemed that he would not heal, his health improved. I was happy for this, and my health improved with his. One day, everything changed inside myself again. I was overwhelmed by an existential terror. I couldn't leave my apartment. I thought of myself as I existed in time and felt as though the floor had been removed. There was no reason that I should feel the way that I did, so I did everything that I could to snap out of it. I took longer walks. I read more books. But everything led me to the same conclusion, that I was a meaningless creature with no purpose, and every step I took led me to the guillotine. I could see it as I lay in bed in my apartment all alone. Then one day I stopped eating, and the dishes stopped collecting. Suddenly there were no more dishes. I stopped going to work. I lost all willpower to move or speak. I was quickly called and fired. So that night and the night after, I slept on the street. At the end of the week, I checked into a hotel to shower. It was a rundown place on the Upper West Side. I checked in order to shower and shave, and when I was clean, I lay down in the bed to get some rest. I left the hotel and walked uptown, and when I got there, I fell asleep on the stoop of the building. Out of nowhere, I could feel someone tapping on my shoulder. I had fallen asleep. It was Mo.
What the fuck are you doing here, buddy?
He spoke out of both sides of his mouth. He had a young face, and the drugs seemed not to have drawn lines on it.
You need a place to stay?
I'm just getting some things together. What are you up to?
I got a big thing set up, selling coke to these kids out in Connecticut. I get the coke here and sell it out there. Double my money each time. You want in?
Of course I wanted in. I told him I'd get the last of my money out of the bank, and I did. I went back to Mo's house. I could see the recliner where the girl died. On the front door, there was still bits of yellow police tape that Mo hadn't taken off after they moved the dead girl's body.
You can sleep on the chair where she died. Don't worry, you got along with her way better than I did. Her ghost ain't gonna attack you.
I ain't worried about ghosts. I'm worried about money.
He looked at me and grinned. He said not to worry, that he had a plan. Mo told me to come out to Connecticut with him, and that just for staking the operation, he would be glad to make me a part of it. I thought about it for about 30 seconds before agreeing. It wasn't so much that I had nowhere to go, but that I couldn't go back to where I had been. It was an odd condition I suffered from. There could be no going back home again, at least for a while. Until I had cooled off, I would make some money and get things back on track. After all, money was money. What was the difference where you got it? He stole my money the minute I let it out of sight. Of course, I should have expected it. But I didn't see it coming, and with my brother's wedding coming in a week, I was on the street. I had no choice. I went back home and slept in sheets, covered in aliens and lightning bolts, with a poster of a Cheshire cat grinning on top of a mushroom, smoking a joint with a caterpillar. I smoked weed and listened to old rock and Enroll. I waited for my brother's wedding. After it was over, I could disappear again, back into the ages to return to the kingdom of memory. It was all that was required of me, to make it to that one singular event, to have my photo taken in order to have a picture developed that could prove I had made it, that I was not as cruel and selfish as everyone thought. I would have that at least, even if I had no more. In the morning, I had a faraway feeling like my head was a bathtub being drained of liquid. I felt disconnected from the process. It had been a rough couple of years, and it had not gotten easier. I felt suffocated. I smoked more and the panic eased, though there was still a base level of dread that existed inside myself that never seemed to go away. The thought that I might make it to a seminal family event without controversy was too much of a lure, and I crawled up inside the thought.